All right, a few more folks are joining us from the waiting room as I speak, but let me take a moment to welcome everyone to tonight's community meeting. My name is Tom Lang. I'm with the Aurora Reimagine Coalition, and I'll be kind of facilitating the conversation tonight. We have a couple of guest speakers sharing updates on what's happening along Aurora, and then I'll also be sharing a few announcements, I guess, of what we're planning to do as a coalition at the end of this year and into 2024. So thank you all for being here. And let me just say right off the bat, very informal. Feel free to raise a hand, unmute if you have a question or comment. Definitely use the chat box if you're more comfortable or capable doing that. But we do definitely want this to be an interactive conversation. So if you are so moved to ask a question or share a comment, please do so. We are here to call and respond, not just speak to you one-sided. So here's the agenda for tonight. What we're going to be talking about. First, we're going to just dive right into what exactly is happening on Aurora, because that is really the first question a lot of people have. They hear things here and there in the media, and they want to know, well, it sounds like there's this happening. What about that thing? Is that the same project or is it different? So I'll kind of give a big overview of what's happening along Aurora and the different city departments and what each one is doing. And then I'll also move into talking a bit about the coalition, very, very broadly, who we are, what we're doing. You can find out a lot more information on our website, but I'll share a few details and then answer any questions that you all might have. Before we dive right into our guest speakers, we have Dave Leclerc and Thomas Hoke from Seattle Public Utilities talking about the exact name of it is the Licton Springs Drainage Systems Analysis, I believe. And there might be a different name for it, but they'll tell us all about what they're doing along Aurora in the Licton Springs neighborhood. And then following that, we have Katie Hama from the Office of Planning and Community Development talking about the North Aurora Planning Project. It's another project through the Office of Planning and Community Development, and it's specifically on all the neighborhoods from Green Lake north to the city limits. And after we hear from all of them, have our Q&A for each, then we'll talk a bit about the biggest project that's happening, kind of the first and largest project right now, which is the Department of Transportation's Aurora Avenue project. And more importantly, we'll be talking about the coalition's advocacy strategy and plans moving into 2024, and of course have time for questions there. And finally, how you can all get involved. We'll share a few details of what's coming up this week and into the farther out future, and share with you ways that you can get involved to make Aurora a safer place for everyone. So first thing I want to talk about is, of course, like I said, the overarching project, the biggest project happening right now and probably for the foreseeable future. It's the Aurora Avenue project, where the Department of Transportation is taking a look at the entire corridor, broken up into segments you can see here on the screen, and looking at safety improvements for pedestrian and bike users, as well as people who are driving vehicle freight traffic. But the primary purpose is to improve pedestrian and bike users and transit users experience along Aurora. And the reason, and that includes transit, of course. So Metro is part of this project. So it's actually an SDOT Metro joint project. SDOT's taking the lead, but Metro's there at all steps. And then it's also important to mention that because Aurora is Highway 99, State Route 99, the Department of Transportation has jurisdiction over large parts of it. But that is part of the project. The Department of Transportation, Washington State Department of Transportation, has jurisdiction over parts of it, and they'll be involved in this project. And it gets a little more complicated because Seattle Public Utilities is also very interested in everything that's happening, all the plans, because whenever a street is dug up in the city, it's a great opportunity for the departments of utilities and City Light to jump in and do some work while the street is torn up. So they're interested and involved. And then, like I said, City Light, and also on top of all of that, and we'll talk more about this with the Office of Planning and Community Development, there's other projects happening that are kind of in tandem, happening concurrently with this bigger project that's looking at the entire corridor. So the North Aurora Community Planning project that I already mentioned from the OPCD, and then there's the Aurora Avenue sidewalk upgrades and tree preservation, another SDOT project, which is finished now. Green Lake Outer Loop project, you probably heard about, finished already. has totally imagined part of Aurora along the west side of Green Lake. And then there's also a home zone project in the Aurora-Licton urban village neighborhood. So that also is very much involved in Aurora and the reimagination of Aurora, the redesign of the roadway itself. So there's a lot of things happening. Here's a less visual slide that shows all of it with a little bit more detail. I won't talk about each one in turn because I already mentioned almost all of these. There is, of course, the one really big project happening that isn't happening yet, but it could soon, $50 million demonstration project. The money hasn't been appropriated by the state legislature, but it is still kind of on the table as an idea. So there's a lot happening. And I mention all of this, talk about all these different projects happening along Aurora concurrently, because this is really the purpose of the coalition, is to bring together all these different departments, all of the stakeholders, the agencies, the community organizations, the neighbors, the businesses, everyone who's involved across the city and even the regional departments to talk about how can we work together to do more than just that one project. How can we capitalize on the work being done by another department? How can we work together to make a single project into a much larger, more transformational project? So that's really our purpose, is to not do any of this work, but to bring the right people together so that the work can be made even better than it would be on its own. The coalition is guided by our vision for Aurora, which is put here in very basic simple terms with all these bolded words. We want to put people first. People who are, of course, driving cars, but also people who are walking and rolling and biking, people who ride transit. We want to make sure that Aurora is meant for people first, not for the cars and large vehicles that it was designed for 100 years ago. We want to support thriving business districts, thriving businesses. We want to make sure the businesses that are currently on Aurora can stay in business on Aurora. We want to make sure that the thriving communities we envision that are centered on Aurora include, of course, businesses as well as dense housing, as well as people coming and going to the neighborhoods that are centered on Aurora. We want to see diverse communities, folks from all income levels and backgrounds. Just like every part of Seattle, we want to make sure that Aurora is a welcoming place for everyone. And also, very importantly, as we look to the far future, really not that far in the future, we want to make sure that whatever Aurora is planned for in the future, it will take into account climate change and mitigate the impacts of climate change, such as stormwater runoff, urban heat island effect, things like that. So there's a lot of other details that come into that vision as we talk about each of these in turn, but this is with broad strokes what we are doing as a coalition, what we hope to see in the future and how we're going to do it. We'll talk a little bit more about the details on the how, the strategy, our advocacy strategy in particular, at the end of this call tonight at the top of the hour. But for right now, I want to pause and make sure there aren't any questions. Does anyone have thoughts, questions, anything I can clarify so that we're all on the same page about what the Aurora Imagine Coalition is before we move on to the next thing on the agenda? All right. If there are no questions, I should have also mentioned this before I stop for questions. If you aren't aware, the coalition is all volunteer run. We are formed by neighborhood groups, businesses, and neighbors, individuals representing different communities along Aurora. We've been in kind of operations since 2021, but we're not a nonprofit. We are not incorporated in the state of Washington. We're not a 501c3. We're grassroots, all volunteer, very loosey-goosey, but we are led by a steering committee of about 18 folks who represent a lot of the neighborhood groups and businesses and individual groups that are part of the coalition. So that's who we are. Now I'll pause and ask if there's any questions about the coalition, about the work we're doing, because if not, we're going to move into our first guest speakers. All right. I am excited to hear from Dave and Thomas at Seattle Public Utilities about this project, I hope I got the name right, Dave and Thomas. I know it's maybe not official what you're calling it, but this was kind of the term I was going with as I put everything together. The Aurora-Licton Springs drainage system analysis. Is that right?
It works. It's the drainage system analysis is something specific
Oh, okay.
that happen, and also we're working on sewer systems. So our shorthand is we're thinking of it as Aurora Avenue conveyance study, because conveyance covers both sewer and stormwater. But your name's pretty
Okay.
descriptive. I like that.
And I'll probably ask these questions later on, but I put a picture here on the side of green stormwater infrastructure, kind of assuming some of the work that might be done along Aurora would be in the realm of green stormwater infrastructure. So that's something really exciting, I think, for a lot of us, because that's what we actually can see day to day. The pipes
Yep.
are under the street. We don't see them, so it's not as interesting to the average person. But I'll stop sharing my screen, let you take over. Please tell us more about this project.
Great. It looks like it says host disabled participant screen sharing. Is there something you can do to unlock that for me?
I made you a
Hey,
co-host.
now it
There you
looks like
go.
it's working. Cool. Thanks. Let me just get this up. All right. Can you see that? Great.
Yep.
So thanks, Tom. Thank you for that great overview. That gave some good context that I don't need to cover now. And thanks for everybody else for being here tonight and for inviting us. So Thomas Hawk and I are both urban planners with SPU. We both work in the drainage and wastewater line of business. We both work on a mix of stormwater projects like green stormwater infrastructure and also on long range planning. And this falls more in that long range planning category, but it's going to be leading into projects. And we've been here in the past and given you really high level kind of sneak previews of what we're doing, but our plan for today is to go into more detail on all that. So Tom's already done a great job of covering some of the interdepartmental Aurora efforts, so I'll just focus on the SPU piece of that. We'll get into a summary of some of the what we think are interesting and challenging issues with this particular drainage basin, which is called the Densmore Basin. You'll see what that looks like in a minute. Both on the stormwater side, that's what, when we say drainage, we mean stormwater, and wastewater, so the sewer side. We have started a pretty intensive planning study looking at this whole corridor, the northern part of Aurora. And we're going to tell you more about what that approach is and also talk about ways that ARC can be involved in this process. And we have, I think in total, we have 14 or 15 slides here. So there's plenty of time for discussion. Like Tom said, if you have questions, if you want clarification, or if you have comments as we go, feel free to talk. I can't see all of you, so just pipe up if you want to. And one thing before I launch into it, I did want to note that understandably, community is really focused on transportation improvements. That's the thing that's most visible and that you're most aware of using every day. And keep in mind, a lot of what we're talking about today is underground. It's not visible, but it has a huge influence on the kinds of, for example, housing and businesses that are able to redevelop on Aurora. There's a lot of real challenges for redevelopment with the existing system. And so even though you don't think of these systems as being at the forefront of your hopes and dreams for Aurora, a lot of what you want for Aurora really can't move forward until we iron out some of these issues. So just kind of have that in the back of your mind as you're looking at this. This probably looks familiar. We're really focused in those segments that Tom described. We're really focused on segments 4 and 5. Those are the areas that overlap with the greatest needs from the Seattle public utilities systems. And I'm just going to skip right over the SDOT bullets there and go to SPU. And there's really 3 things that are coming up. One of them is this study that we're in the middle of right now, which is going to be, we have a team of engineers and landscape architects and planners who are working with us on what should the ideal system layout of the future look like on Aurora. Since we have this opportunity to work with SDOT, what is it that we want so we can help guide that SDOT project in the right way as far as our infrastructure goes. And that's looking at everything for segments 4 and 5. A more detailed geography that we're looking at is the Aurora-Licton urban village. In that area, we're starting what we call a focus area plan. And that's more of a planning document that is a detailed look, not just at Aurora, but also at all the side streets, the cross streets in the Aurora-Licton urban village. And in particular, we look at things like demographics and growth patterns and community priorities. What are the things that we already know that the community is working on? And how could investments and different policies relating to stormwater and sewer support those broader community goals? So we're thinking in those two scales, all of North Aurora, and then in more detail for Aurora-Licton. I can talk more, if you're interested, I can talk more about why we have a more intensive focus there. And then we know that this is kind of just the beginning. The work that SDOT is doing is going to happen in many phases, probably potentially over a couple decades. And we have we have a mix of roles with that. On the one hand, SPU regulates some of what SDOT's doing, so we have some ability to require them to make certain kinds of improvements. And then we also have a partnering role. Sometimes if we want pipe improvements or storage improvements in a place and we don't have the statutory authority to require SDOT to provide those improvements, we can partner with them where we put money into an SDOT project and pay for those beyond code improvements. And then you'll be hearing from OPCD, so I will not steal any of Katie's thunder. Okay, so now we get into some maps, which is always a fun part. The Densmore Basin, it's called that because the outlet, let's see, the outlets to Green Lake is down here at Densmore. This is a large watershed that drains, it's about 1,600 acres. It drains from the border with Shoreline down to Green Lake. Depending on what kind of storm event is happening, if it's not raining very hard, all the water from this big lavender area drains along the north side of Green Lake. It goes to a pump station that King County owns, and that water is then pumped uphill and then down to the Ship Canal. So on a relatively dry day or a small rainstorm, any rain that you see on the street anywhere in this catchment is ultimately ending up in the Ship Canal near Lake Union. Once it really starts raining hard, that pump station that's located down here gets overwhelmed. It can't keep pumping water fast enough to pump all the water out. So there's a structure here at the north end of Green Lake. And in those heavier rain events, water from the Densmore Basin starts to flow into Green Lake. And then it's held in Green Lake temporarily, and after the rain stops, it drains back out to Lake Union. So all the water's eventually ending up in the Ship Canal, but depending on the conditions, it might be stopping in Green Lake on the way. You can see that this lines up very neatly with, like, Aurora is the backbone running right down the middle of the Densmore Basin. For those of you who are interested in creeks and hydrology, we're sandwiched in between Piper's Creek Basin is over on the west side, and the Thornton Creek Basin is over here on the east side. And so the Densmore Basin is this engineered drainage catchment that runs right down the middle in between those two creek basins. It encapsulates almost all of Bitter Lake and almost all of Aurora-Licton. And you can see those first 15 blocks that SDOT is planning to do as a pilot are right in the middle of the Aurora-Licton urban village. We know that there's a huge amount of development potential and likelihood of development in this area. We know that it's going to be a continued focus of transit investments, whether it's through Rapid Ride or potentially future Sound Transit investments. And we know that there's a lot of issues that the community has been focused on that are listed here that don't directly have to do with transportation or sewer and drainage, but can be affected a lot by the type of development happens. So indirectly, there are these connections between the infrastructure, the underground infrastructure, and these other community issues. Before I move on from this slide, I wanted to note Thomas and I participated in the home zone process. We were at a couple of those walking tours, and we're well aware of those recommendations. And I do think, going back to your comment about green infrastructure, Tom, It's pretty unlikely that there's going to be very much green stormwater infrastructure at all on Aurora itself. There's too many conflicting uses, and it's hard for us to maintain green infrastructure well on a really busy arterial. However, on several of the cross streets, that was something that came out of that home zone process, is lots of opportunities for green infrastructure on the cross streets where they meet Aurora. Okay, here we're going to take a more detailed look at the drainage system, and there's a lot going on here, but I'm going to do my best to break this down. So again, in lavender, we have the Densmore Basin. I'm not showing the urban villages, but you kind of generally know where they are. These dark blue pipes, this is the existing infrastructure. This is the existing drainage infrastructure in the Densmore Basin. The dark blue pipes are storm drains, and that's a term that we use for larger pipes that tend to be 5 or 6 feet below ground and easier to maintain. And these light blue pipes are what we call culverts. And culverts are usually places where once upon a time there was a ditch until somebody got tired of there being a ditch there and they just put a pipe in. And usually that pipe is right under the surface, and it's usually pretty slapdash. You'll have a PVC pipe going into a concrete pipe, going into a metal pipe, going back into a ditch, going into, you get the idea. And all kinds of different sizes, very hard to maintain. And that's most of what we have along Aurora, is these culverts that are right below the surface. And they might work for picking up the drainage off of Aurora when you have a small storm, but anytime it rains hard, those are going to get overwhelmed. And anytime development happens and wants to tie into something to discharge their drainage, you usually can't connect from a parcel to these pipes because they're so shallow. Oh, yes, that's highlighted there. So these are big areas where we have culverts. And I do want to, before I go through these highlights, I just want to note this very interesting pattern with the Densmore Basin, which is you've got this almost parallel. This is probably where historic drainage happened, or some version of this, because this is kind of the low point in the landscape, is this meandering path that comes down along the east side through Licton Springs Park and down to Green Lake. So that's kind of like the shadow drainage system that, we don't have the drainage we should have on Aurora, but we do have a stronger drainage system that's off to the side of Aurora. So back to going through these points. So we've got the shallow culverts on much of Aurora. We have, even though the basin and the topography generally go south from 145th down to Green Lake, you'll notice that there's lots of little rolling hills and dips along that way. And so most of how this drainage works, because these pipes are so shallow, water will collect for a few blocks and then it gets piped over to the meandering path. And then water collects for a few blocks and it goes back over to the east. So there's not a continuous flow of stormwater from north to south going through this basin. There's I'm only highlighting a couple of spots here, but there are many, many points in the system where key pieces of the drainage system go under private property. And that's always, that's a hazard for SPU because it creates maintenance headaches for us. It can create some big costs for us. It's a hazard for the community because it means if one of these pipes gets clogged, some debris gets stuck in there. I'm not sure if this is the case with this pipe, but some of the pipes up here actually run underneath warehouses. So if under buildings, under private property, and just don't have good access. So when that happens, when you get a problem in a pipe that's not on public property, it can take us a really long time to maintain it. And it can affect everything that's upstream of that. So we had, back in 2003, there was a pretty comprehensive system layout developed for how drainage should work along Aurora or through the Densmore Basin. In that, they contemplated making improvements on Aurora, but in 2003, there was no plan to rebuild Aurora. And the engineers who were working on it at that point basically said, it would be ideal to have a really good drainage system on Aurora, but we're never going to get permission to tear up Aurora and put this drainage system in. So they made a bunch of recommendations for what we could do off to the side. But now, that this project is actually happening, we think we have an opportunity to maybe get a more ideal drainage system. Okay, the sewer system, it's a little harder to see the Densmore Basin, but it's here in gray. Fortunately, the sewer system is not, it doesn't have as many problems as the drainage system has, but it still has some issues. There's a long segment that lacks sewer mains. Fortunately, you know, a chunk of that's going through the cemetery, and this other chunk has parcels that have, they might have, even though there aren't sewer mains on Aurora, there might be sewer mains on the backside of some of those parcels. But there are some gaps, is the point of this. The trunk line that all these sewer pipes connect to is the same kind of meandering path. Obviously, the sewer is not going into Green Lake, but it does come down toward Green Lake at the same spot, and then it comes around and it gets pumped down, and then eventually goes out to the sewage treatment plant in Magnolia. Sorry. And like the drainage mains, there are a few places where the sewer mains go under private property, like this piece that goes under part of the Washelli Cemetery. And there's hundreds of acres upstream of that, that if we have a problem with that sewer, maintaining it's going to be a challenge and could affect customers all up through this area. Thomas is going to take over for the next couple of slides, but before I move on from this overview of the drainage and sewer systems, did people want me to elaborate on anything? Okay, then we can come back to these also if you'd like. Thomas, take it away.
Dave. Okay, so our project references two studies that our team completed recently. They're the drainage system analysis and the wastewater and sewer analysis. These studies modeled drainage and sewer system capacity across the city and identified risk areas where pipes are most likely to be overly full and potentially causing some of the problems that you may have experienced in this area. Yeah, you can see that thick black line going right down the middle, that's Aurora, and you can just see all the red and orange that kind of is right aligned with Aurora Avenue. So within the DSA, the drainage system analysis, we looked into where to prioritize future drainage system investments to reduce flooding risks. The DSA identified priorities for drainage system investments, which in the past, SPU relied heavily on customer complaints or field reports to identify locations with flooding issues, which unfortunately resulted in underreported issues and also just lacked equity in that form of outreach. So the drainage system analysis used computer-based modeling and community outreach, especially in communities of color where underreporting of flooding is likely. The wastewater and sewer analysis, that objective was to identify and understand where sewer backups are most likely to occur, which generally happens on private property and within public right-of-way. And SDOT's initial 15 blocks are identified as critical drainage capacity risks as part of their larger project up and down Aurora Avenue. You can go to the next slide. Okay. So as part of our current phase of our focus area plan, we're focusing in the Aurora-Licton Urban Village, but also really just looking at the larger Densmore Basin. And what we've done so far is we've incorporated several historic data sets of reported problem areas and issues from the community and from SPU crews and some of our other subject matter experts here within SPU. So we've synthesized about 5 different data sets from roughly the past 20 years, which also includes some claims from data from some damage claims. And many of the issues were resolved through capital projects over the years that have occurred within the last 20 years. And we try to identify and remove those from the data that we're working to put together currently. This the goal is to provide another level of insight into the issues in the areas that supplement the analyses that we're working on, and provide a fuller, more complete picture. So some of the key problem areas that we know are along the Aurora corridor. There's insufficient pipe capacity and hot spots up and down the corridor. There's really no surprise there. There's alignment between the modeling results and our real world observations. Lots of right-of-way drainage issues, as well as some drainage issues on private properties, and a few sewer issues as well. So even with all of this data, we're still looking to collect input from the ARC network and people who live in the neighborhood. Our ask is that you share your feedback on known flooding issues that you've all come across. So we've developed an online Google-based interactive map where you can enter location markers and details for these issues based on your knowledge of the problems. We've collected a lot of these issues from past engagement, such as the home zone engagement last summer, issues that you've all submitted to the city, some of those past historical claims, as well as our subject matter experts' knowledge. But what we're really looking for next is some of the newer issues that we might have missed or just haven't been reported yet. And so that's our ask is, as the ARC network, is to help us kind of fill in those gaps of those details that we might not have quite yet. Tom, I have a couple of resources. One is basically a data dump of these sites that we know that we've received that are locations of issues, and also kind of the map for where those are located within the area. We're asking that before the ARC network adds any additional problem markers to this Google map, just to take a quick peek at that body of work that we've already compiled together to see if the area that you might have in mind is already accounted for on that larger map. And I can include those documents in the chat for everyone here. And Tom, I can also email them to you just to maybe send out to the ARC network. So with this ARC engagement map on Google, there is a requirement that you do have a Google account in order to add details into the map. Unfortunately, that's just how Google manages their assets, I guess. So that's a Google requirement, unfortunately. If you don't have access to a Google account, you can also email me your issues directly, and here's my email address on the slide here. I'm just asking for a location of the issue, a brief description, and maybe a frequency of the issue and how often you identify that occurring. So with the Google map here, and I have a little video here that Dave, you can click play. It kind of just highlights the method of adding a point in. So you'll click that top add marker icon, identify where in the map that you want to put that marker. You can title it. I think it's really flooding and ponding are our main two areas that we're looking for. And then you can just provide that brief description in there on what the issue is and any details on occurrence. And if you want to leave your initial or name, and we can maybe follow up if we have any additional questions, that would be really helpful too. Or you can just leave it anonymous. And once you have that detail in there, you just hit save, and that's been added in there to the map. So it's pretty straightforward if you're familiar with the Google Map interface. And I guess just to highlight, we're looking for those newer locations that we haven't captured yet. We don't want it. We're trying to avoid over-reporting issues and maybe creating a bigger problem area that there may not actually be. So really just want to emphasize, if you can take a look at the work that we've already completed, that would be really helpful in getting this newer information.
Cool. Thank you, Thomas. And the way that they would check that, the map of the ones that we know about already, is it linked in there, or you just is
No,
Tom gonna email that out?
I wasn't able to, thanks, Dave. I wasn't able to link it into the map, but I can include that in the chat now, and I can email it to Tom to send out to the ARC network.
Perfect. Thank you.
Hey, Thomas, can you put the link in like a short disclaimer at the top in the description of the map, the top left corner area?
Yes. Could you explain that second half one
So
more time?
like it right now, what does it say? It's really small. I can't read it, but it says our community feedback. You can type in whatever you want there to describe the map. You could put in the link at that point and also say, check this out first before you go add a new marker. That way it'll all
Right.
be in the same place.
Yeah. So I think that's what Dave was asking if I was able to do also. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to figure out how to link that, but I can, especially if folks don't have a Google account, they can't access like a Google Drive document. But
Right.
yeah, I'll figure out how to troubleshoot that and get that more seamless for everyone.
Cool. Thank you. Well, yeah, before I move on, any questions about how to use this web map to give us feedback? You can email me, or I'll have both of our contacts at the end. You can email either one of us with questions.
We got one question from Jesse.
Oh yeah, go for it, Jesse.
Thank you. I want to make sure I understand what you see as a problem, and granted, I haven't looked at what your known problems are yet. I ride through there a couple days a week right now, right down Ashworth. And I've noticed that on days when it hasn't rained for a few days, suddenly water will start gushing out of these small, like, holes on the curb by the park, or on the other side where the houses are. And I'm just wondering, is that as intended, or is that something abnormal that I should be reporting?
A lot of the time when you see that, somebody has a pump running somewhere where they're getting groundwater into a basement or something, and they're pumping it up, which is not necessarily, like, that's not allowed in most cases, but it is what happens. So feel free to report that. I think the main thing that we're hoping for is if you're aware of flooding or sewer problems that, for example, affect mobility, if they make it unsafe to walk somewhere or bike somewhere, or if it's, water that is damaging property or threatening homes, that kind of thing. Those are the main things that we're looking for. But if you have, flagging mysteries like that is okay, because there might be something particular. We know that there's really high groundwater in that area, so there's a number of different reasons it might be happening, but good to have a note of any of those kinds of interesting observations. Thanks for the question. Okay. So zooming back out of Aurora-Licton and into our overall study, our primary goals are we want to get ahead and stay a little bit ahead of the SDOT process, because this is our opportunity. And a lot of these questions, a lot of the time, some of the engineering that is involved in figuring out drainage and sewer problems is slower and more complicated and has more regulations on it than some of the transportation decisions. So we really want to figure out as much as we can in the next year and try to stay 1 or 2 steps ahead of the SDOT process. Right now we're behind and kind of catching up. But it's really important that we have a clear picture of the improvements that we want so we can guide that process correctly. Like I said, there's going to be 2 levels of detail we're looking at. One of them is just the trunk line, so the really big main sewer mains and drainage mains going down Aurora. And then we want a more detailed system layout for all of Aurora-Licton. And then, when I was showing you the Densmore Basin, I talked about that pump station and the complicated, way that some of this drains to Green Lake and some of it drains to Lake Union. The bad news for us as we try to figure out this project is, if you think about the Densmore Basin as a bunch of hoses it's like we have all these hoses with kinks and narrow spots and leaks and stuff in them. And we want to fix all that. But once we do, it means all the water is going to hit the bottom of the basin much faster than it does right now. So It could be if we just went up into the Densmore Basin and we fixed all the drainage problems and we didn't think about the downstream impacts, we could create some really significant downstream problems. So that's part of our study too, is figuring out what is this going to do to peak flow down at that King County pump station, and what are some of the ways we could mitigate that. We're still just getting started, but we're probably in the first third of this study that's going to take a year long and get us to fall 2024 before we have some final recommendations. And then from those recommendations, we move on to a design process in parallel with SDOT. I am going to skip over. We've given our consultants a mix of things that are thou shalt, like we must meet certain requirements, and then we have some guidelines of things that we would like to achieve. And I'm happy to expand on that, but it's maybe more detailed than you want, so I'm just going to keep moving here. Anticipated challenges. I just mentioned this one, the peak flow impacts of the downstream system. Water quality is a huge thing. So far, everything that we've talked about so far has been about adding capacity to prevent flooding, but currently none of the stormwater that comes out of the Densmore Basin gets any kind of water quality treatment before it goes into Green Lake or Lake Union, and that is a lot of water, and it takes space to provide water quality treatment. So that's going to be a big challenge, figuring out how we try to address water quality at the same time as we address capacity. We're concerned that, we don't know of any problems with this right now, but down the road, there might be a mismatch between what SDOT's priorities are for phasing and what our priorities are for phasing. Generally, with drainage and sewer systems, you want to start on the downstream side, upsize, make those pipes bigger, and then work your way upstream from there. If you make the upstream pipes big, it can worsen some of the downstream problems. So we're going to have to be in negotiations and careful alignment with SDOT to make sure that we get the phasing as close as we can to what works for the civil engineering side. And then competition for space in the right of way. We know that there's a lot of ideas about what people want above ground. We may end up in situations where there's also conflicts with drinking water, and if there's undergrounding of any of the electrical infrastructure, there's limited real estate both on the surface and underneath the surface, and we know that could be a challenge. And this is all going to be very expensive. So we have the funding to do this initial study. We have funding to partner with SDOT on some of the improvements, but for the scale of this thing, it's easily well over 50 million, and potentially 3 or 4 times that if we have to start putting in stormwater ponds as part of the work that we're doing. So it could get very expensive, and we'll need to factor that in with the phasing also. So I just had a couple of general discussion prompts, and I'll mention those. If you have any feedback for us on our approach or the assumptions that we've made so far, we'd love to hear those. If you have any questions where you want more information, let's talk about it. And then also would like to hear from you all about, we're going to be working on this study for the next year. How often would you like to be hearing back from us? And are there particular topics you'd like more detail on? And anything else you've got on your mind? I'm going to stop sharing so I can see more people, but we can put that back up.
Any questions or answers to those questions that Dave had for all of you? Stephen, please.
Thanks for that overview. I had no idea about any of this, so it was really helpful. I was just wondering if climate change was factored into those 25-year return events.
Yeah, that's an awesome question, and one that we're working through right now. We do have, this may be something you know a lot about already, but for anybody who isn't up to speed on it, all the climate models suggest that weather in our area is going to get drier in the summer and rainier in the winter. We're going to have more intense rainstorms. And, we don't have a crystal ball to know exactly how that's going to work out, but there's pretty good models of showing how fast that's going to happen. So we have we have, what's the best way to summarize this? We have models that estimate what climate change, what rainfall is going to look like in 2100. And that's something that as we're designing the system, we're going to do our best to manage not just today's flows, but also look out to 2100 and figure out how big do the pipes need to be for that. There might be physical limitations on that. You can only make the pipe so big before they're sticking up out of the road. And so, we might not be able to design a system that manages the 2100 storms, but we're going to do what we can for that. And if we see that we can't make it, then there needs to be a longer term strategy about detention ponds, for example, that might need to get phased in over time. So we're thinking about climate change. The harder thing, honestly, is projecting how future development is going to change all this, because development goes both directions. Like infill housing development is going to increase imperviousness, and that could make more runoff. But redevelopment on Aurora, which is already pretty much 100% impervious, when that redevelops, we might get, through stormwater code, we might get some improvements. And figuring out how those things balance each other that's what we're wrestling with right now, is what assumptions should we make about future development and how that's going to affect stormwater. Larry.
Very impressed with the brief. Thanks for the fantastic work. My questions surround one of the densest and fastest growing areas of Aurora, where they're adding lots of supportive housing and subsidized housing. Is it fair to say that the sewer impacts are separate from the scope of your current work?
Sewer impacts we've mostly been talking about stormwater because that's where we have the biggest problems, but we are also looking at the sewer system because we think that there's sewer improvements needed on Aurora, and that is part of our scope.
Okay.
And that's a little easier to project because you can just figure out how much growth is likely to happen, and there are formulas to sort of translate new housing units into new sewer flows. So yeah, that's something we're taking into consideration.
Gotcha. I certainly don't speak for everyone, but I think most people have a strong view that we need to save our salmon and protect Puget Sound.
Yeah.
So the things you're working on, I think, appeal to the many. I just don't think you're going to find a whole lot of naysayers. So whether it's 50 million or 300 million, I think the real question is what needs to be done and how do we build support for what needs to be done? Because we're humans and we're sending something into the sound that has an impact. Just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that. Laura, I see you've got your hand up.
Thank you. Again, thanks for the presentation and all the good information that has been shared. I wondered if you could zero in a little bit more on the Aurora-Licton Springs Urban Village. It's come up a few times, and I'm wondering how related the various things are. I think you said that it was a focus area for you. Also that it had critical risk in terms of the drainage area. Tom also mentioned that it is the site of a demonstration project that's been funded at $50 million, but not appropriated. So I'm wondering how connected those things are. And then also, as you talked about wanting to start downstream to increase drainage, noting that that's not downstream from the Green Lake outflow of the drainage basin. So wondering if, how you would foresee the priorities in getting that demonstration project started, given that may be one of the first things that, or we hope it's one of the first things that SDOT might see potential to actually change.
Yep, you're muted, Dave.
Great question, and good job putting the pieces together, because you covered pretty much all the reasons why we're starting to focus in more detail on Aurora-Licton, which is, approximately this area. It's where SDOT's likely to start, so it's the first place we're going to have the opportunity to start upsizing pipes. So we feel like it's especially urgent for us to have a clear idea about what we want on Aurora, and not just on Aurora, but how future improvements from development are going to connect to the main lines on Aurora. It is a place where we have a bigger concentration of risk areas and known problems. They're all up and down the basin, but if you're going to sort of draw a circle around where most of them are concentrated, it's here. And then also, it's as far downstream as we can get in the Dinsmore Basin on Aurora. And yes, this outlet is going to probably need improvements, but we think that, this is a theory. We're just at the very beginning of the study. So this is all like, this could all change as we see what some of the results are. But we're thinking that this area that we refer to as the Dinsmore outlet, this can probably continue as it is for a while we start making upgrades on Aurora. But at some point, like, we can't go from here to 145th Street and assume that this is going to be able to handle all those increased flows. Like, we need a plan for when this needs to get phased in, but we still are thinking that we can start with that work that SDOT's planning on Aurora. Did I cover the different parts of your question?
Yes, thank you. That's great. Can I add one more part?
Yeah.
Thank you. So at the beginning, Tom's talked a little bit about green stormwater infrastructure, and you had suggested that it might happen off Aurora, but still on the side streets supporting the project, the whole design of the whole thing. So maybe could you just give us an example in the A-Love area, if that's the starting point, what that would look like?
For sure. So this is, I don't think that this is the final version from the home zone process, but this was the last draft that I have that shows green infrastructure on it. And I liked what SDOT was showing in this version, which is some of the places where you guys had, through the home zone process, you'd prioritize traffic calming and better pedestrian crossings. And they had worked with us to pick some of the places that seem like good candidates for both traffic calming and green infrastructure. That's what these little icons mean. So sorry, north is to the right here. I should have cropped this so it had the north arrow in it. So we're looking at the west side of Aurora, and I see, 92nd, 95th, 100th, 100, and basically 100th through 104th. Those are all candidates for places where we might be able to fit in green infrastructure on the downhill sides of those blocks right before they get to Aurora. So some of that, at a minimum, green infrastructure in those places would be providing water quality treatment before that runoff's going into the main lines on Aurora. If we're lucky and if the soils are good in those places, and if we have enough room, we might be able to slow that water down too, not just treat it, not just clean it up. But we don't know those kinds of details yet. But that's an example of how, like, even if it doesn't fit on Aurora, we think it could fit close to Aurora on some of the side streets.
Thank you. That's great. So I guess what I was thinking is that there might be opportunity for new development to also include ways to slow that water down by just adding pervious surfaces or rooftop gardens or whatever also. But that sounds like it's outside the scope of what you're currently planning.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. It's like what we're working on with our consultants is more focused on what are the pipes that we want in the road and what are the impacts of that going to be. But at the same time, we do have a stormwater code that regulates development. All of this development is subject to pretty strict, as long as it's above, I think the threshold is 10,000 square feet of new and replaced impervious surface. Any bigger developments are going to trigger pretty significant stormwater requirements that could include bioretention, permeable paving, storage tanks, that kind of thing. So that's what code requires. And then another thing that we didn't get into in this presentation that is we would like to reach out to some of the bigger property owners in this area and talk to them about something that we've been trying to get going recently is beyond code partnerships, which is where we essentially pay developers to put in green infrastructure if they're willing to, in places where we can't require it by code. Sometimes, and we have some cases of that where developers have agreed to put in, green infrastructure that's not treating their runoff, it's treating the street runoff, but they put it in as part of their project. So that's definitely something that we're interested in, generally in Seattle, but specifically in the Dinsmore Basin too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dave,
great.
that last part is really interesting. Let's talk maybe after the call about a couple of key players that we might be able to connect you with who would be interested, I think, maybe in the near future on that kind of partnership. And that also gets into the development conversation and especially in this neighborhood and other places north and south of the Licton Springs neighborhood, development and community planning is what we're going to talk about next. So I don't want to, we'll segue into that in just a moment, but I had one quick thought to echo what Larry was saying, and also building off of what Stephen was talking about with looking to the future and climate change mitigation. We, like Larry said, I think we all are on board with what needs to be done. And then I think we might even go farther and say what should be done looking ahead 100 years. So I'm curious if there's any room at this early stage in the planning to not just present to the public, here's what needs to be done for the next like 10 years, 20 years, here's the size of pipes we need, here's where they need to go, but go further and say, if we really want to make a resilient Dinsmore Basin drainage system, these are the kinds of projects that should happen. And maybe it'll be like a far-fetched, vision of the future, but that's kind of what we're doing here at the coalition. We're talking about what do we want to see 100 years from now, looking far into the future, and then how do we get to it in the short term. So what would it look like if we could dream big? And we have to talk about it right now. I'm sure you don't have any firm answers at this point, but I would maybe just suggest that SPU really present not only the needed things, but also the big ticket items, the dream things that would be really, really great for the entire city if we could start to implement these sort of things sooner than 2100.
Yeah, it's a really important question, and it's one we're thinking about. And realistically, if past is precedent, it's very reasonable to assume that we're not going to have another opportunity to do this infrastructure at this scale for another 80 to 100 years. Who knows? Maybe we'll all be flying around on surfboards or something. I don't. Maybe we won't need Aurora, but it's likely that it's going to continue to be a major highway, and it's not something that we can go back and keep fiddling with. So we really need to have a long range plan with the infrastructure improvements that we make. So I agree. And yes, let's talk about development opportunities. I'd love to hear any leads you've got.
Yeah. Let's talk about that, and also maybe how we can plug in with the Licton Springs neighborhood more specifically, because right now we're talking about the entire corridor, so we won't dive too much into Licton Springs. But this is all great. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Thomas, for the presentation. Really good information, and I hope we can come back and hear from you again in like 6 or 8 months when we have a little bit more of a connection to the SDOT project and the phasing of what that might look like in the near future. One quick comment question from Luca, and then we'll move on to OPCD. Luca.
It's not particularly important. So if we are on a time crunch, then I can withhold my question. We're good? Okay. So I do maybe if you guys could give a quick description of sort of what your imagination would be if from the limited knowledge that you have right now of what the most extensive sort of planning for worst forecast for climate change, most impervious development, what would that look like underneath? What would that look like for Aurora? What would a project of that magnitude look like? Would it be closures on Aurora for months? Would it be just like as sort of an engineer, what would the logistics of putting, a pipe that big under that road would look like?
Oh yeah, so you're actually talking about construction impacts.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question, but these are big pipes, and I think that we are at least closing down, one or more lanes for a long period of time, for months probably, while these projects are happening. But this is not like, I don't do construction management, and I've never worked on a project at this scale, so I would hesitate to hazard a guess. But we will know more about that down the road.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks again, Thomas and Dave.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Talk to you again soon, I'm sure. Let me turn it over now to Katie Hama with the Office of Planning and Community Development. She's going to be talking about the Aurora Community Planning project. I guess it's a project. I just put that up as the title, and Katie definitely correct me with the correct title of whatever it is you're doing.
That's great. So I am trying to share my screen, but it's saying I'm a participant, so I
Now you're a co-host too.
can't. Okay,
You
cool.
have the power.
Thanks. All right, let's see if I can make this work. Bada boom. Can you see that? Oh no, wait.
No.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Magic. Okay, cool. Sorry, I didn't use Zoom a lot. Cool. So thank you so much for having me. I know we are a little bit behind schedule, so don't worry, I talk very fast. So just a little bit about me before I get started. My name is Katie. I live within the North Aurora area, so I am very familiar with the challenges of raising a family here. I have also been in the small business world as an owner operator, so I bring that perspective to this work as well. My background is landscape architecture, environmental studies, and I've been working for a planner for about a decade. A lot of that at OPCD, doing various things like permitting, land use policy, housing policy, urban design, community planning, and a little bit of transportation planning. And my real passions are around child-friendly cities and really working with communities to create amazing public spaces for people to meet and connect with each other. So I'm just telling you that because I am a real human. I work for the government, but I in fact live here, and so I care a lot about this work and what we're doing here. So I'm going to give a pretty quick overview of just sort of what community planning is, why we're doing it here, a little bit about the process, a little bit about where it might lead to. But I want to save some time to have an actual discussion with you because so much of community planning is really grounded in what the community wants, what you guys want to see. So I also apologize in advance. I don't have a lot of pretty pictures like Dave. He's got a lot of lovely maps. I don't have a lot of lovely pictures. I have a lot of very boring text. So I apologize. So I'll just start out. So OPCD's vision, this is just, part of how we provide the foundation for our work is that Seattle will become a more equitable, livable, and sustainable city by centering community and racial justice in our planning, community development, and design process and decision. So this is where we ground ourselves in how we do our work. So what is community planning? So in a nutshell, community planning is working with community, partnering with community at the neighborhood scale to develop localized strategies that address community-defined priorities. So these often take the form of community plans. They might result in area-specific rezones or other type of implementing actions. Through this work, we often identify long-range visions, goals, and policies for a neighborhood or community, sort of depending on what those boundaries are that we set to the project. And we really look at strategies for future development as well. So part of that is also with placemaking. So that's working sort of at the site or like district scale to translate some of those community priorities into great places. And so that can take a lot of different forms as well, from sort of like neighborhood level urban design frameworks or design guidelines or development standards down to sort of specific transformative projects or initiatives. So a lot of those can involve, bigger coordination of city capital investments across multiple departments. And some of them can be much more sort of nimble, funded by things like matching grants, sort of community. They come from communities, similar to some of the projects that Casey Pierce has been working on with the artwork along the corridor. So there's a whole range, essentially, is what I'm trying to say, of things that we do through community planning from big to small, and they're all on the table. So why North Aurora? You know this. So obviously, SDOT working on their corridor redesign is a huge opportunity to really think holistically about the neighborhood surrounding the corridor. So there has been, a little bit of planning in sort of smaller geographic areas, such as the Bear Lake area, or, some planning within a very narrow scope, such as some of the like urban design work that was done in the early 2000s. There really hasn't been a holistic planning effort for really that, the whole northern segment of the corridor. So along with this sort of slight uptick in development interest that we're seeing, and with the future potential catalyst that an updated Aurora Avenue could produce, along with E-line investments, there's this huge opportunity for more housing, for more jobs. And so we have this perfect storm of, a huge opportunity to align any planned or future investments to ensure that they're really benefiting both the existing community and future communities. So it is the perfect time to be doing this work. So just real quick, the sort of initial study area, and I'm saying initial because we can refine this. It is not hard and fast. We have to draw a line somewhere so that not everything in the world is included. But think of this as sort of a fuzzy line. It is dotted for a reason. Obviously, things don't stop at a line on the street. So this is generally the area we're looking at. So it encompasses the Aurora-Licton Springs urban village, as well as the Bitter Lake urban village. But as well as some of those areas sort of to the east and west. And we actually sort of swoop in a little bit of the Northgate urban center just because it goes over the freeway. Generally north of 85th up to 185th. So that's segments 4 and 5 that SDOT is looking at. So our community planning processes are generally conceptualized as sort of 4 parts. However, they're not generally as distinct as this diagram actually makes them seem. They're not also like even in time, right? This makes it look like they're all just, nice little chunks. They take a lot of, these are all varying lengths of time. But so generally, phase 1 which is what we are in currently, is about defining the scope of work. It's about connecting with community and identifying those key issues and themes. We do that from community conversations. We also work to identify potential areas of alignment with city departments. So this is really getting all of our ducks in a row, understanding what all of the other departments are working on and how we can coordinate amongst each other to do outreach, to talk to our partners, and also to start, addressing community priorities. Phase 2 is about taking all those things we learned about community goals and priorities, and then exploring ideas about what we can do about them. So we learned about what people want to see, what they want to work on, some themes, and then we start saying, what are the actual strategies that we could do? What are some concepts that we can use? What are some specific tools that the city might have that we could use to address these? So we might, through this, come up with some, different zoning alternatives to explore, or we might come up with some, looking at different transportation networks and how we might want to rethink our streets. We might think about different sort of community building projects or aspects. So there's a lot of different things that we can look at in here, and it all depends on what we hear from you about what you want to talk about and what you want to see. Excuse me. So phase 3 is now we've talked about all those amazing ideas. People are super excited about them. We work and we make sure we vet them with all of our partner departments, and we get them down on paper, we get them into a plan. So that plan will then form the foundation of the work that is to come. It is not the work in and of itself. That is just a record. That is our wish list. That is the stuff we're going to work on. So that forms the foundation of the work, which is the implementation. And so phase 4 is a very long phase. It's implementation. So there's some, shorter term things that we can look at doing. Those might be some of those smaller interventions that start getting people really excited about bigger change. Those might be some opportunities that are in the near term with new development that's happening, or people who own land that want to partner on things. But then we also have it also might be, if there's any regulatory things we want to do, so changing zoning, doing different development standards, things like that. This also is about all of those much longer range things where we might need to put it into a long-term strategic plan for capital investments in the future. So implementation is a very long part, sort of the short term and the long term. So right now, just kind of thinking about what we're doing in this process, how we're talking to our partner departments and what we're working on. There's a few ongoing projects. So obviously SDOT's Aurora Corridor Planning Study, the comprehensive plan is ongoing. There is work going on with the Northgate sub-area planning. And so that's a thing that's required by the state for our urban centers because of the proximity of Northgate to Aurora and sort of the connectedness of these two places, particularly a lot of people, go to Northgate for goods and services, but also for light rail and other things. We will be working with that team, hopefully to do some shared economic analysis to really understand the landscape of sort of the northern end. Working with the home zone program at SDOT, working with Parks and their strategic plan. They have some acquisition needs that they would like to do. And then, as Dave said, working with SPU to sort of find out where we can make those coordinated investments, particularly working with property owners. Some potential programs that we might be able to coordinate with, and also, use in conjunction with some of this planning. There's some work around low emissions neighborhoods, and also some work around native neighborhoods that's starting. So there's a lot of things that are already happening, and part of my job is to kind of bring those all together and make sure that we are coordinating, to make sure that when we are investing dollars, we make sure that we are having multiple benefits across, across the departments, not just one thing at a time. So some potential outcomes from this process, and like I said, this will sort of depend on where, community wants to take this, what they're excited about. But generally there's some sort of community action plan. The Crown Hill Urban Village Action Plan is one of the more recent ones we did. So just as an example, community capacity building, that's a thing that we really do want to help support. So we want to help support existing organizations do their work, build their base, and really be advocates for their community. We don't want this to be a super top-down thing. And so we rely on folks like you showing up, caring, and getting the word out there and advocating for the things you want. We can be doing urban design recommendations and placemaking initiatives. So again, we can look at sort of the bigger scale things and then down to sort of, smaller, more immediate projects. We can look at equitable development strategies. We can look at near-term opportunities for partnerships and investments. So really that's working with landowners, business owners who might be interested in doing things in the near term that might benefit community. Looking at those longer term plans for infrastructure and facility investments, and then zoning changes or development standards. So those are all things that are sort of on the table that we could do through this planning process. So right now, like I mentioned, we're sort of in this first phase. The first phase is also a very long phase because a lot of it is the work of connecting with people. So right now, connecting with community organizations such as yours, working on connecting with businesses in the area, with landowners, with groups and people that don't typically show up to meetings like this. So that takes a lot of time and effort to reach out to those groups that are often underrepresented in these planning processes and make sure we're hearing from them as well. We are doing a lot of internal coordination with our partner agencies, particularly SDOT, SPU, parks, to understand their needs in the area and where we can coordinate on those. We're working on exploring and analyzing a lot of data. So there will be some, maps and other things forthcoming that will be sharing some information, all just to sort of help us ground ourselves in the reality. Obviously, a lot of you live and work here, so you have a great perspective on, what's happening on the ground. Sometimes the data just lends us a viewpoint that we don't see. And then compiling what we've already heard. Through the years over various planning processes, not just from OPC, but from other departments, we've heard a lot of feedback from people. So we want to make sure that we're gathering all that first before we come back out and ask you the same questions 9,000 times. So a lot of things we've already heard so far. Public safety, obviously, huge concern from a lot of people. Improving walkability by slowing down cars and providing safe connections. People want to see more housing options. People want to see more locally serving businesses and destinations. There's some idea that, we want some more neighborhood centers instead of just a long corridor, actually sort of having these identifiable sort of identities of like centers for people to go to. Public green and open spaces are lacking, and community gathering spaces, particularly community centers, are sort of lacking. So these are just some of the major themes that we've heard thus far. And so we will continue with our community conversations to see, more about what people love about the area, but also what they want to see to change. So just sort of the near-term next steps, I'll be putting out a survey soon, so stay tuned for that. And then sharing out what we learn via a website. We'll be doing some updates and some more fun things with the website to come. And then we'll sort of start moving into identifying those themes and community priorities that we hear from the outreach. So we'll compile everything that we've heard and we'll kind of do a report out to make sure we got it right. And then we'll start moving into phase 2. Where we're exploring some of those near-term opportunities and longer-term strategies. And like I said, it's not like discrete phases, as I showed in that diagram. It does all really overlap a little bit. So, we're doing some of that exploring of near-term opportunities right now. So I just want to, so I would love to stop talking about the planning process, and I would love to spend a little bit of time talking to you all. I know that we're pretty short on time, so trying to think. How about I'm going to go through, I have 3 questions, and if you could, I'll give you like a minute each. If you could type in the chat, I know some of you are on phones, do your best. Answers to these questions. Keep them super short. They don't need to be complete sentences. Just some words would be great. And I want to do this just because it is good to hear what other people think in the room. So question one, just a couple things. What do you love about your neighborhood? So just take a minute or two to just type in the chat, and then we'll look at some of the answers. And I'm really curious to see, you know, where we have some themes popping out, where there's similarities, where there's differences. I need to figure out how to pull up the chat.
While you're figuring out the chat there, Katie, Luca
Yeah.
has a hand raised.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Yeah, while everybody's typing, I just have a question about your past sort of plans of this community variety.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever embarked on any, I guess, minor projects that have ever reduced carbon emissions, reduced vehicle miles traveled, sort of, you know, again, with the idea of looking ahead 100 years, that have done anything to really make the lives of my generation a lot easier?
Oh man, it's my generation too.
So true.
How old do you think? No. So what I will say to that is, yes, incrementally, yes. A lot of the work, particularly that SDOT is doing with reallocating space in the right of way to more bicycling and walking, all of those incrementally to some degree can help with that. Has there been a project in which that has been the focus of the work? Not to my knowledge, but I don't know everything. So again, as we're thinking about, you know, themes that come out of community engagement, you know, that is a potential theme that a lot of things nest under. And obviously a lot of these things are very interconnected, right? So, you know, having more walkable streets with slower speeds and fewer cars is sort of in the same vein as that. And so a lot of this comes down to how we want to frame some of these topics and these themes to really, you know, motivate community and to advocate for some changes in your neighborhood.
And so you guys do have the ability to go in and like reallocate space on streets to bicycles and sidewalks and stuff like that.
I mean, I don't, because I don't work for SDOT.
Yes.
But yes, that is theoretically within that. I mean, that is in their wheelhouse, so to say. And so part of this work is figuring out, you know, where does that make sense? Obviously, a lot of the areas within the study area don't have sidewalks. And so there is, you know, what is the statistic that we love to throw around? It would take like 200 years or something to build all the sidewalks in the city. And so, you know, the home zones is one type of way that you can look at sort of traffic calming measures, but I think there's some other things that we can explore to sort of help get to the same end goal that might look a little bit differently, and particularly leveraging potential investments or changes to the Aurora corridor, thinking about, you know, limiting access on through streets, stuff like that. So there's a lot of opportunities to sort of address the, you know, prioritizing pedestrian modes of travel within our residential streets. So we can look at a lot of those, like super blocking is another type of thing, or putting in diverters, like all that kind of stuff. So we have to think about, is the goal, you know, lower emissions? Is part of the goal reducing through traffic so that our streets are safer for people walking, for our kids to play? Like lots of different ways to frame it. So that's all the kind of fun stuff that we can work on of what makes sense for this community and what speaks to them. You. Okay, I can't see the chat when I'm sharing. So Tom, I'm gonna anoint you as pull out a couple of things you find interesting or compelling in there.
People. Mostly everyone says they love the people, and then there's definitely some observations that there is not a complete sidewalk network and safety is an issue. But what
Those
they
are the
love
things
is
you love about the neighborhood.
no. That just came up naturally because it's hard to not mention it.
I know. Okay, next question. And I'm gonna go through the chat after this, and I'm gonna save all the notes I get. So I can't see it now, but I will take these into account. So I want to know, what are you most excited about? Again, like, what's your vision? What are your priorities? And just a few words. It doesn't have to be a long thing, but just like, what's your thing? Like, what do you want to see? I want to know. What are you excited about? What are you passionate about? So I'll give you another minute. And if anyone has a question while you're typing, Luca, your hand is still up, so I don't know if you have another question or it's a legacy hand.
Sorry, I don't. Yeah, legacy hand.
All right, Tom, I'm gonna rely on you again for this. Pull out a couple.
It's transportation related,
Yep.
transportation, community, better connections. Mark says light rail along Aurora.
That is visionary. That is
That's
long-term
it's a
visionary. I love it.
simple vision, a simple and expensive vision. I love it.
All right, and then last question. What are you concerned about in terms of, and what I mean by that, of this planning process? Like, what would be a bad outcome at the end of this planning process? If we did this work and you're like, we missed it, we missed the mark. What are we trying to avoid? Right, and once again, Tom, if you could do the honors. Thanks.
Um, Carla says that we do nothing. That would be a really bad outcome if nothing changes.
Mhm.
Displacement was mentioned a couple times. We don't want people to be displaced, not divide the community into neighbors versus business, but to have instead come together. So a range of things, but definitely we want the community to be together and we want things to change and not just be talked about indefinitely.
That's amazing. That's a great place to start from. And so I like to do this to sort of ground people in you know what we're trying to do together here. It is hard work. There's a lot of different stakeholders. Obviously, you know, you are sort of a self-selected group. There's a lot of other people out there who don't think the same as you. And so part of this work is bringing people together to understand each other and to understand, you know, people's needs and desires and figure out how we can sort of coalesce around solutions that might not be the best for everyone, but that really take everyone's needs into consideration. So that is all the talking I have for you. I'm happy to answer questions, but I also know you have other stuff to move on. And so I'm happy to come back to this group at a future time. If you want to talk a little bit more about things, if there's specific topics that you want to talk about, happy to do that as well. So I will let you decide what you want to do from here.
Thanks, Katie. Let's pause for questions at the very end because we do have some more things to talk about before we get into a lot of Q&A. But thanks, Katie, for all of that. I am going to jump in now and talk about the Aurora Avenue project that SDOT's leading. I have a feeling a lot of folks on the screen attended at least one of the workshops this summer that SDOT hosted, talking about a vision for the future of Aurora by segment. So you probably heard similar questions to what Katie just asked, which is great because they're really good starting questions for kind of building a vision based in the community's desires and concerns. What I can share then as an update is really nothing more than what you heard at those workshops. What I'm sharing on the screen now is the kind of executive summary of what SDOT heard from those series of workshops. I think they did 5 or 6 total, plus they had a lot of kind of one-on-one small group, focus group sessions with small organizations, small community groups. And what came out of it was a whole lot of what you would expect. The people want to see Aurora changed. We want to see it different and improved. What I can tell you is a little bit of what we've heard internally through meetings with SDOT and what we kind of know is going to be coming down the pipeline in the next few months, so to speak. But officially, there's not a whole lot to share except what they have here in this this document, this kind of executive summary document. So where they're at now, you can see the project timeline, fall 2023, design and planning, and then in winter of 2024, they'll start the report out and have another survey. It's really going to be like, here's the ideas that SDOT and the analysis, the analysts, the consultants, they came together and did a lot of analyses. Together, they are going to have some ideas about what the entire corridor could look like, that corridor redesign. And that's what they'll ask the community to weigh in on in winter, spring of 2024. So we don't expect to hear anything from SDOT until probably later this month at the very earliest. I would guess probably December, if not January, February of 2024. So what we end up hearing, I'll talk about in just a second, but I think it's important to drill down on what they heard, because it's really important that we understand it's not a minority opinion. Most people agree on changes that make being on Aurora better. What people disagree on are little details like, should there be a bike lane here? Should there be a bus lane here? Left turn or no left turn? Those kind of things that the engineers will figure out are important, but the most important thing is that we can all agree that something needs to change. People need to feel safer along the highway, and they need to treat it like a community hub and not just a pass-through highway. So one thing that SDOT is doing right now, has already done actually, that makes the highway a little bit better and is kind of implementing what the community wants to see, is what we're calling, or what they call, spot improvements. This is one of them, no turn on red. You probably have seen signs up at every signaled intersection along Aurora. Here on the right side of the screen, you can see all those orange dots. That's every intersection where there are now no turn on red signs in all directions. Of course, people maybe don't obey those signs, but it's a really good start to at least say pedestrians are prioritized here. We want to make it safer for pedestrians to cross these intersections, cross the crosswalks here. That's why these signs are up. So that's a great start. Leading pedestrian intervals have also been implemented, and they're also committed. We understand, we won't believe anything until there's concrete on the ground, but we understand they're committed to putting in a new crosswalk at 128th and at 137th streets. So that's a great improvement as well. All of this is going to help make it a little bit safer for people who are walking up and down and across Aurora. Other spot improvements that we expect to see in the near future, potentially, nothing's going to happen necessarily, but we're hoping, is things like maybe a redesign of the 41st Street pedestrian bridge. The 102nd Street pedestrian bridge also is going to be seismically retrofitted. There's a lot of opportunities, and we are still, as a coalition, hopeful that some of these bigger spot improvement projects could happen. The no turn on red signs are great, but they are a very small little project. We want to see something bigger, something like build the damn sidewalks up in Bitter Lake where there aren't any, especially this spot right here in front of the Amazon Fresh store. There's just an open ditch along Aurora. It's one of the last places you'll see in the city. A very dense neighborhood has an open ditch along a major arterial with the busiest bus line in the entire state. So those are the kind of spot improvements we would love to see. The no turn on red signs are great. We applaud SDOT for doing that quickly. There's a lot more that can be done, and we are committed to advocating for those types of spot improvements soon. What we do want to emphasize is that in the next year, 2024, probably starting in January, we're going to hear something from SDOT. It's going to be maybe a list of ideas, different alternatives for what the entire corridor might look like, how they might redesign it. Those are just going to be ideas. It is not at all a plan that they would then go ahead and implement, find funding and then start building. It would be just ideas. And the reason I say this, it's really important. SDOT at this point has no future funding to implement. Let me turn off the screen share so I can really drive this home. They have no funding to do anything else besides present these ideas for the entire corridor. We hope that they'll get more funding. We really do expect them to secure at least one, maybe two federal grants, and that will continue the planning process into 2024, 2025. But if they don't get that funding, then there will be nothing happening, no EIS, no environmental impact statement, and no final design process where they can then go out to bid and have someone actually build the new designed Aurora Avenue. So that's really important to note, that what we are going to be presented with as a community in 2024, early 2024, is really just a couple of ideas for what Aurora could look like. And of course, we are going to continue advocating for the very best and boldest and safest design for Aurora, but we recognize that it still is just talk, and we really want to make sure that we move as quickly as possible to a safer Aurora that benefits the community. So what we are going to do as a coalition, our advocacy strategy is going to be really similar to what we've done for the last 2 years. We are going to continue to connect with key groups. We're going to really reach out to those organizations and those communities that we haven't been in touch with yet, or haven't brought on board completely into the coalition. We want to gain those groups' support so that we can be a stronger coalition when we do approach elected leaders and decision makers, funders, so that we can really stand behind a bold vision for Aurora, and they can see it as a cohesive community group that's advocating for that. We're going to continue to host public actions. We expect as SDOT unveils their plans for their ideas for the corridor, there will be opportunities for public comment. We will definitely have some public events, possibly even not. I use the word protest on the slide, but it might not be a protest, but at least a call to action for the community to recognize that there's a lot more that could be done. The ideas that SDOT's presenting are not going far enough, those sort of things. And we want to continue to mobilize the community to come together around Aurora rather than avoid Aurora. So community cleanup actions, public artwork, public events and festivals, those sort of things. We're going to continue to draw attention to Aurora as a community hub and really create the future we want to see. And we'll continue to gather media attention. All three of these things are going to happen on Saturday. This Saturday, November 18th at 11 a.m. We are going to honor World Day of Remembrance for victims of traffic violence. It's a worldwide day to recognize how many people die moving through cities all around the world. And we are going to do it on Aurora at 84th Street to honor the 35 people who have died traveling on Aurora since 2015, the year that the city committed to Vision Zero. This is part of a much larger action organized by Seattle Neighborhood Greenways that is putting up silhouettes across the entire city. You can see a picture of one of them here up at, I think it's 143rd and Aurora. Those silhouettes are posted at each of the locations where someone has been killed since 2015 traveling through the city. There's over 226 of them across town, which is astounding and awful, and we need to do everything we can to bring those numbers down in the next 8 years. So we are going to meet at Daniel Bagley Elementary at 80th and Aurora at 11 a.m., 10:45 a.m. We'll start walking at 11 a.m. It'll be a walking vigil up to 84th Street, where we will have a couple remarks, a community art installation. We're going to hang a big banner, and then hopefully we'll be able to break by 11:30. Won't be a lot of time, but we do really want everyone to come down for that short period of time to honor the folks who have died and to bring more attention to Aurora. We're going to have the media come, hopefully some elected leaders, and as many people as possible to shed light on the traffic fatalities along Aurora. So we invite you all to join us there. At the end of the day, the coalition is committed to creating transformational change along Aurora. We have a lot of ideas and visions, but most importantly, we want to bring the community together to advocate for those visions and ideas. So what you can do to get more involved is join a committee, stay in touch with us. We have a number of ways to get involved. We talked a little bit about anti-displacement. We don't want people to get pushed out when all of this development and construction happens in the near future. So there's a whole committee talking about that and thinking about policies that we could put in place across the entire city that would keep businesses and neighbors in their current places and not be priced out. We want to pedestrianize Oak Tree Village or do something with that space because it is just an empty parking lot right now. And we want to see a complete micro mobility network, bike and micro mobility network, north and south and across Aurora, so that people can get around the city by means other than cars and be able to do it safely without avoiding Aurora. So there's a lot of different ways to get involved. Spread the word, share this with your neighbors, talk to them, and of course come to the event on Saturday and we can talk more there in person. I want to thank everyone for being with us tonight. We went a little over time, but if you want to hang out for a few more minutes, we can ask some questions of Katie, who's still on the call. I see Dave's also here, which is great. Thanks, Dave. And if you have any questions, put it in the chat, raise your hand. Any comments are welcome as well. And thank you all once again for being here. I'm going to read the chat here and see if there's anything that I missed. Yes, Jack is mentioning some great things in the chat here about the Move Seattle levy is coming up. That's a big deal. Of course, new council members, another big deal. There's a lot of moving parts in early 2024. So we're really excited for next year. A lot's going to be happening quickly and we are going to hit the ground running. Right. I'm going to stop this recording.